Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining me. I know you had a lot of great options, so I'm really grateful that you came to mine. Now, this presentation is a proposal to change the language of medicine so that it promotes rather than impedes health and healing. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, have you ever noticed that the language of Western medicine is actually the language of war? Modern medicine wants to fight the infection, kill the virus, eradicate the invaders, bacteria, irradiate the tumour, conquer cancer, defeat the disease, and wage war on obesity. Drugs and various therapies are referred to as armamentarium. People are popping painkillers, and you must follow doctors' orders. A person falls ill, a woman falls pregnant, and is informed of her expected date of confinement when she will go into labour. Every day, people are combating cancer, battling the bulge, struggling with weight loss, or succumbing to their illness. Even outside medical circles, people are trying to whip themselves into shape or push through a punishing workout. And we're forever searching for that silver bullet. This is major warfare we're talking. What's wrong with this approach? Everything. Because language doesn't merely reflect our world. Language creates our world. The metaphors we use to describe our experiences profoundly influence how we perceive and respond to those experiences. And you realise that doctors are practising medicine. They're still only practising. I don't want anyone practising on my body. I want someone who knows what they're doing. You may be familiar with an ancient Greek fable in which Aesop's master, Xanthus, said to him one day, "Tonight my disciples will dine with me, so I want you to prepare the best feast you can." So that evening, Aesop served them hog's tongues. Xanthus said, "What do you mean by serving us tongue? I asked you to bring us the best thing you could." "Well, what could be better or sweeter than a tongue?" said Aesop. "A tongue can soothe, educate, praise, comfort. A tongue can express compassion, empathy and love. There is no greater good than this." "Fair enough," said Xanthus. The next day he said, "Tonight my disciples will dine with me again, but I want them to learn a different lesson. Tonight I want you to bring us the worst thing you can possibly find." So that evening, Aesop served them tongue again. "What do you mean by serving us tongue again? I wanted the worst thing tonight." "Well, what could be more evil or wicked than a tongue? A tongue can offend, lie, destroy, love. There is no greater evil than this." Language has power, and with great power comes great responsibility. Now, Western medical terminology has its roots in Latin, in Greek and Roman empires with their militant conquer-the-world mentality. And we've brought that way of thinking into healthcare. But is it really appropriate? So much of what we do is combating, is oppositional. We have antibiotics, antivirals, anticonvulsants, anticongestants, anticoagulants, anticholinergics, antidepressants, antidiarrheals, antiemetics, antifungals, antimalarials, anti-inflammatories, antihistamines, antihypertensives, antiseptics, antipsychotics, antacids, and we're decidedly anti-aging. And the anti we need most, I know I haven't listed all the antis in our weaponry. And the anti we need most is an antidote to all the fighting and all the warfare. So what is wrong with the warfare approach? Well, for a start, the language of medicine as it relates to war is very disempowering. You know, disease is something that comes at me and I don't know what to do to prevent it, because how can you prevent war? You never know when some crazy is going to throw a bomb at you, some crazy, dictator. So the idea of war is something that comes at us and there is little I can do about us. The language of war also dilutes the prevention message because of this reason. Secondly, in war there are always casualties, whether the battle is won or lost. So the warfare approach leads to collateral damage in our body and in our mind. Collateral damage to our body because there are no drugs without side effects, no surgery without risks, no radiation with damage to tissues beyond its target organs. And collateral damage to our mind because fighting is exhausting. It wears us down. Thirdly, the language of medicine, the language of war, has us regarding our bodies as a battlefield. What happened to treating the body like a temple? The language of medicine gives mixed messages. On the one hand, we tell people to look after your body, and the next minute we're waging war on the body. No wonder people find it difficult to sustain a healthy lifestyle. It's confusing. Am I at war with my body or am I at peace? When we hear the language of war, we immediately tense up. And finally, the language of war creates fear, anxiety and stress, all of which are counter to health and healing. Stress weakens our immune system. Stress leads to visceral fat deposition. Fear and anxiety are at the root of all self-destructive behaviours, binge eating, addictions, comfort eating. This is promoting illness, not curing it. So the last thing we need is more conflict, more war, more fighting, more things to stress us. Which brings us to the all-important question. How has the warfare approach worked for us? Is the human race a model of vibrant health and vitality? Think about this for a moment. We have made the most staggering advances in medicine, science and technology. We have mapped the entire human genome. We've synthesised hormones. We've implanted embryos. We've transplanted hearts, lungs, livers, kidneys, pancreases. Yet we haven't made a dent in curbing the tide of chronic diseases. How is this possible that in the age of medical marvels that we're getting sicker and more tired and more depressed by the day, and we're getting sicker and sicker at a younger and younger age? And it isn't just one disease that's on the rise, it's all diseases, all non-communicable diseases. Allergies, autism, anxiety, autoimmune diseases, cancer, diabetes, depression, dementia, ADHD, food intolerances, the list goes on. I think it's an indication that something needs to change, because if we keep doing what we've always done, we'll keep doing what we've always got. And I propose that we change the language of medicine. Why? Because changing our language would change the paradigm of medicine. Changing our language would restructure how we approach health and healing. I'm not saying that I never use antibiotics, of course I do. A lot of the things we have are life-saving, but the fact that we are talking about them in such an antagonistic way is so not helpful and is counterproductive. So I don't want to don't get me wrong, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Medicine is excellent at treating emergencies, acute conditions, ruptured appendices and severed limbs. But medicine is not good at managing, treating, healing chronic diseases. Modern medicine isn't even about healing. It's about repairing. It's about fixing things that block or burn or burst or break or bleed. It's about restoring function to a malfunctioning part. Healing, on the other hand, is a journey of empowerment. Healing is moving towards greater aliveness and vitality. Healing is accepting and embracing every part of ourselves unconditionally. Healing is recognising ourselves as whole and complete. And healing is being at peace with ourselves and at peace with life. Healing is not about being at war, because the body has the intrinsic capacity to heal if we let it. Voltaire observed that the art of medicine consists of amusing the patient until nature cures the disease. When we sustain a cut, a bruise, a broken bone, the body does the healing. Every day we see the bruise fading, a scab forming, the bone tissue knits together. Now, modern medicine can support the body in healing by putting the limb in a plaster to stop it from moving, by putting stitches in so that it holds the wound together. But eventually the plaster comes off and the stitches are removed or dissolved. So the role of modern medicine, as I see it, is to keep us alive long enough to give us the opportunity to heal. And healing begins with changing the language of medicine. So how do we do that? By adopting 10 empowering healing principles, which I've encapsulated in short, memorable phrases. You can call them guiding mantras if you like, or slogans, whatever you like to call them. But the power of them is that they will change the lens through which we practice and approach medicine. And the focus will be on healing, nurturing, supporting, rather than killing and fighting. And that immediately creates a strong foundation for healing. So principle number 1 is love, not war. Love means working with our body and not against our body. Love means working with life and not against life. So the more we, and I'm sure that I'm preaching to the choir here, to the converted. So when we talk about how we're going to manage somebody's illness, let's talk about, nurture and support, because that's what's going to promote our intrinsic capacity to heal. So the sort of language I will use, regardless of what I'm doing, well, it depends on the context, is together, let's strengthen your immune system, build up your resilience, enable your organs to do their job, nourish your microbiome, boost your brain, stimulate your neurons, restore optimal functioning, and promote your body's intrinsic capacity to heal. I mean, that is just so, people walk out feeling good. If we spoke about exercise as nurture rather than torture, a lot more people would be exercising. At the age of 80, I bought Dad his first ever gym membership. I did not buy that silver tracksuit. I have no idea where that came from. But if I'd have talked about exercise as a workout, he would never have come. Who wants to have a workout after a hard day's work? Yeah, sure, there are some nutters out there who like to flog themselves at the gym, but most people like to have fun. And I'm not saying the gym isn't fun. I personally think it is fun, but we're not marketing the gym or exercise as fun. We're apologetic. Oh yeah, you need to exercise. No, exercise is exciting. Movement is magic. We need to actually get excited and talk about it in an excited way. Whenever I tried to encourage Dad to go to the gym, I was selling it as fun. Hey, let's see who's feeling stronger today. Hey, let's play a few ball games at the gym. Let's see who's faster on the treadmill. Do you want to help me, gain a bit of strength? If I'd have said, you need to exercise because otherwise you're going to lose brain cells and end up with even worse dementia than you already have, he wouldn't have come. I can assure you for that. Whether we realise it or not, we automatically tense up in response to words indicative of combat, and we relax when we hear the words of love. In 2005, the results of a study done by the Maryland School of Medicine in Baltimore was presented to the American Convention of Cardiologists in Orlando, Florida. And what the researchers had done was they measured changes in brachial artery blood flow in response to participants watching one of 2 films, either the war film, Saving Private Ryan, or the comedy, Kingpin. And what they found was that after watching war scenes that caused distress, brachial artery blood flow was reduced by an average of reduced by 35% in 14 out of the 20 participants. Whereas when they watched the comedy and they were laughing, brachial artery blood flow increased in 19 of the 20 participants by 22%. Now that is a difference, 35, 22, 57% in response to imagery and emotion. That's how profoundly those things influence our health. So love builds up, not tears down. Love protects, not harms. Health and healing are the result of feeling at peace with ourselves, not the result of war. And love and respect for ourselves and our bodies, that is what provides lifelong motivation to look after ourselves. Like, would you deliberately hurt somebody you loved? Of course not. Yes, we do it without meaning to, but we never hurt someone deliberately that we love. Would you deliberately spill red wine over a white silk blouse? Yes, if it belonged to somebody who was flirting with your partner, but not if you liked the blouse. Would you deliberately drive your car into a brick wall? Of course not. But we tend to treat our bodies with less respect than we treat our possessions. So a pivotal question I ask all my clients and patients is, how can you increase some love in your life? How can you bring more love in your life? Whether it's to yourself, to others, to the world. Now sometimes love is too big a leap. It's just such a foreign concept. But if I love myself, I'm not going to want to change. No. You can love yourself and still, that's actually going to give you more motivation to improve rather than less. But for some people, love is just too far a goal. So in that instance, a really good starting place is gratitude, the second healing mantra. Gratitude is the best attitude. A really beautiful daily, nightly practice, and I encourage all my patients and clients. I talk about patients and clients because in the medical setting I've got patients and in the health coaching setting I've got clients, but I'll use the words interchangeably, okay? But a really beautiful practice is, I say every night when you go to bed, just bring your awareness to each of your body parts and express gratitude or thanks for what they do for you. You know, I thank my toes, my feet, my legs, my hips for carrying me around all day. I thank my skeleton, my back, my gut, my heart for all the work it does. I thank my lungs, my head, my brain, my arms, my hands. I thank all my body parts for what they do for me. And the part that is expressing disease, I thank that part the most of all because it is bringing my attention to something that needs looking at, that needs exploring, that perhaps needs changing in my life. And gratitude is in and of itself healing. Psychologists Robert Emmons and Michael McCulloch, that's the name of the scientists, not the squirrels, they did a series of experiments on people who had neuromuscular diseases, and they randomised them into one of three groups. Group number one was asked to keep a daily record of their hassles. Just all the things that are annoying you, you write them down, keep a record of them. Group number two were asked to keep a daily record of their blessings, to express in as much detail as possible all the things that they were grateful for. And group number three were just asked to journal neutral events that were going on in their life, kind of like keeping a neutral diary. Within 1 month, those in the gratitude group, but not in the other two groups, not only the patients, but their family members reported that their mood was certainly a lot better. They actually needed fewer pain medications. Their quality of life was better. They were feeling better subjectively. They were doing more. They had more energy just by practicing gratitude. Gratitude is in and of itself a healing attitude. Principle number 3, now this is where it starts to get a little bit challenging, is to ask ourselves, what if disease were a doorway instead of a defect, a dread, a disaster, a demerit point on the scoreboard of life? Because that's how we tend to view disease, as something to be despondent about. But what if instead we decided to view disease as a doorway? What would happen? Well, firstly, we'd want to know a doorway to what? Maybe, and I'm only putting these things out there for you to consider, maybe disease could be a doorway to growth, truth, wisdom, freedom. So how are we actually defining disease if I'm proposing that disease could do all these good things? Well, the word disease comes from the Old French déseis, meaning lack of ease. So the meaning of disease is embedded in the word itself, dis-ease, not feeling at ease with my current state of body or mind. And because disease does not feel pleasant, you know, it often stops me doing things I wanted to do. It imposes physical limitations on me. I can't do what I wanted to do in the short term, sometimes in the long term. Because it's getting in the way of my plans and I don't like it, we tend to define disease as a bad thing. But is it necessarily a bad thing? And because we don't like it, maybe that's all the more reason to pause and take a deeper look at what we could learn from disease. Maybe the function of disease is to make us aware that something in my life isn't quite right, or that maybe could be better. Now, this is where you're going to start to panic. I am not saying that this is about blaming somebody for their disease. It's not about somebody has caused their disease or somebody has done something wrong. The last thing I would ever suggest is that somebody was to blame for their cancer. Somebody caused their own cancer. That's not what I'm saying. You don't have to have caused something in order to take steps to ameliorate it. Childhood trauma, workplace bullying, racial discrimination, air pollution, they are all well documented, significant contributing factors, if not direct causes of disease. None of them are the fault of the individual. Can I just have a show of hands? How many of you here have never been sick, have never had any sort of illness, disease, departure from health? Pretty much across the board, disease is universal. We all experience disease at one point or another, most of us, to a greater or lesser degree. And it's entirely up to each individual whether we choose to walk through the doorway into the unknown or close the doorway and stay on the side of the known and hold things together as they are. Now, what do I mean by that? Closing the door, staying on the side of the known means just give me something to ameliorate my symptoms. I don't want to change. I don't want to do anything differently. I just want to get back to my high stress job. Just give me something so I can just get over this as quickly as possible. That's closing the door. That's not walking through the doorway. Walking through the doorway means listening to my body, working with my body, asking myself, okay, what might have brought this on? What in my life could have contributed to this? Is there something that I could change to strengthen my immune system? Walking through the doorway is about getting curious, not critical about our disease. Because I'm going to propose that there is just one cause of all diseases, with the exception of genetic mutations and inherited trauma, which is a whole other conversation. But those two things aside, there is just one cause of all disease. One word, I want one word. Can anyone think what it might be? Conflict. Conflict of some sort. Conflict with our basic bodily needs for rest, recreation, good food, movement, fresh air, sunshine. Or it could be conflict with our psychological needs for purpose and authentic self-expression. It could be conflict with our emotional needs for meaningful connection with our fellow human. Or it could be conflict with the ecological needs of our planet. So the last thing we need is more conflict. Conflict is the cause, not the cure for disease. So I encourage all my patients very gently, because I do explain this to them, where in your life might you be experiencing conflict? You know, is there any conflict in your life? You know, conflict with your physical or emotional needs, conflict with your partner, your values, your neighbour. Is there any sort of conflict? Or is your life just a daily battle trying to keep up with demands and deadlines? Just think about if there is any conflict. Because sometimes disease is the body calling out. Give me some rest, feed me better, move me. Sometimes disease is the heart calling out. Forgive me, fulfill me, fire me up. Sometimes disease is the soul or the human spirit or whatever you want to call that inner knowing. Sometimes it's our spirit calling out. Hear me, know me, allow me to guide you. And when we ask ourselves, what part of me is calling out to me? The answer always comes. But we live such fast-paced, furious, frantic lives. It's like we're going, boo! How are we supposed to hear anything in all that racket, especially the faint whisper of our intuition? And sometimes, even if we pause long enough to get still through meditation, mindfulness, a stroll in nature, or just keeping still, sometimes we don't want to hear the answer because it might entail us changing or doing something we don't want to do. And any sort of change, you know, can be threatening. So whether we are ready to change or not, this healing principle, doorway not defect, what if disease were a doorway, not a defect? This healing principle is to prompt people to consider the possibility that disease could be a doorway to a more authentic and fulfilling life. Which brings us to the fourth healing principle, connection, not isolation. What I mean by that is disease does not occur in a vacuum. Disease does not occur in isolation with everything else that's going on in our life. Everything in our life affects our health. We can't separate our physical health from our emotional, social, psychological, mental, planetary health. Everything that's going on affects us in one way or the other. And it isn't just the obvious things like food, exercise, quality of sleep, but also the quality of our relationships. Whether we're living in alignment with our values, whether we have a sense of meaning and purpose. you know, what we believe, what we think, what we say, how much stress we're under, whether we have buried childhood neglect. All of these things impact our health, and modern medicine gives so little value to these things. But I would argue that all the things apart from food, exercise and sleep, which I think are really important, I still think the other things are even more important because they create the foundation. Our body is a reflection of our past traumas, our current habits, our future hopes, our deep-seated fears, and the physical environment we live in, and the cultural and social community that we find ourselves in. So this mantra principle is simply about recognising and asking our patients about more than just diet and exercise and stress and sleep. How are your relationships? How do you feel about your work? Do you bounce out of bed in the morning? Are there things you dread? You know, are there things niggling at you? It's just about having a broader conversation. And it brings us to the fifth healing principle, which is actually based on the Harvard study of adult development. Now, this was a study in which they followed more than 700 Harvard graduates for more than 80 years. In Australia, that would be stalking. In America, it's science. But in fact, the study is ongoing. It used to just only be men. It's now women. And you can listen to the results on YouTube. Robert Waldinger. It's a really great YouTube, and it talks all about this study. But the question they wanted to answer was, what is the biggest predictor of a long, healthy, happy life? Remember, they followed them for more than 80 years. They looked at diet, exercise, education, socioeconomic status, fame, fortune, you know, smoking, alcohol, meditation, you name it, they looked at it. What do you think was the biggest, strongest predictor of staying healthy and living a long life and being happy? What was it? Relationships. The quality of their relations. Having a confidant, feeling part of a community. Conversely, loneliness is as damaging as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. People are more powerful than pills. That is our fifth healing principle. I think we need to prescribe relationships, people, before we even start to prescribe pills. If we want to strengthen our immune system, reduce our risk of heart disease, stroke, depression, dementia, our number one health habit needs to be cultivating good, supportive relationships. Studies have even found that people who are in a good marriage have a stronger hand grip strength than people who are unmarried or feel lonely. It affects us on every level. Now, I have to say, I'm really lucky. I have the most wonderful man in my life. I have a man who loves kisses and cuddles. I have a man who is kind and caring. I even have a man who cooks and cleans. How lucky am I? Especially as I have a way of making sure these three men never meet. There was a study at Monash University only earlier this year where they actually looked at the effects of different types of social interaction. So you can look this one up or ask me and I can send you the article. They actually found that men who had three or more close relatives whom they felt that they could confide in reduced their risk of cardiovascular disease by 30%. Now this was after ruling out family history, smoking, other known risk factors for heart disease. Men who played competitive games like chess, card games, golf, reduced their risk by 18%. Women who just lived with someone, whether it was a relative or a friend or other people, reduced their risk of cardiovascular disease by 26%. And women who had three or more confidants reduced their risk of cardiovascular disease by 29%. So sort of the big picture is good friends, good relationships, having a confidant pretty much reduces our risk of heart disease by 30%. No statin, no PCSK9, no drug on the market is as powerful for protecting our heart. There's another study that, at Pittsburgh Mellon University that looked at 276 healthy volunteers, and once again they looked at various health parameters, whether they smoked, how much they drank, their sleeping, their diet, their exercise, and then they dripped cold virus into their noses and they quarantined them for 5 days. I'd like to see them try that with COVID. The question they wanted to answer was, what was the greatest predictor of getting a cold? Was it smoking? Was it asthma? No. The greatest predictor of catching a cold was feeling lonely and socially isolated. Those who just, filled out the questionnaire and said they had good relationships developed a cold at a quarter the rate of those who felt socially disconnected. Good relationships strengthen our immune system. Good relationships also halve our lifetime risk of getting dementia. When a spouse dies, if it's been a good relationship, the risk of dementia in the widow or widower skyrockets. My favourite, and I find this the most mind-blowing of all, study, and look, I could talk the hour just about good relationships, but I'll just finish off with one more because this one is fascinating. They did a study they invited 42 married couples into the lab. They were aged between 22 and 77, so we're talking right across the age sphere. And they agreed to have a blister induced on their forearm on 2 separate occasions. On one occasion, they were guided through a pleasant interaction. They were asked to talk about their honeymoon and all their good times. On the other occasion, they were asked to talk about a disagreement or a conflict in the marriage. To the amazement of the researchers, the wounds healed much more slowly after the conflict than after talking about pleasant experiences. And in fact, couples who were more hostile to each other healed at 60% the rate of happier, more supportive couples. That means it took them nearly twice as long to heal if they were in a bad marriage. That is phenomenal. My parents had a really good marriage. I can remember the first time I ever moved out of home to live with a boyfriend. After 3 weeks, we'd started to have too many fights and I wanted to move back home. So I rang home and Dad picked up and I said, Dad, he's being nasty to me. Can I move back home to live with you and Mum again? And my father was outraged. And he said, what? If that young man is being nasty to my little girl, he deserves to be punished. You're not moving back home with us. I'm sending your mother to go and live with the two of you. So one of the essential questions I ask all my clients is, do you have somebody that you could ring at 3 a.m. if you're in a crisis? Do you have someone with whom you can share your joys and fears? If not, find that someone. And the way you find that someone is you be that someone. Just go out of your way to cultivate a friendship. It might be a long-lost friendship that you rekindle, or it might mean joining a club or getting closer to your existing workmates or neighbours. But having that confidant is critical, because what are the 4 most powerful words in any language? I'm here for you. There are no medications as mighty as our mates. Let's prescribe people before we prescribe pills. The next healing principle is encapsulated in the following story. There was once an old man who lived in a village with his 2 greatest loves, his son and his horse. They were his livelihood, they were his support, they were everything to him. One day there was a really bad storm and the horse got very scared and spooked. And it was just running around and got so scared that it broke through the fence and disappeared out into the forest. The next day, all the neighbours came running to the old man and said, look, this is a terrible thing that's happened, we'll help you find your horse. They searched all day. They couldn't find the horse. At the end of the day, they said, we're so sorry. What are you going to do? This is such a bad thing that's happened to you. And the old man said, well, who knows if this is such a bad thing or if this is a good thing? All the neighbours said, how could this possibly be a good thing? You've just lost your horse. This is half your life. Well, the old man did struggle on the farm for a while, but a few weeks later, on a beautiful, bright, sunny day, what should happen? But the horse had found its way home. And not only had the horse come home, it had found a companion horse in the wild, so now the man had 2 horses. Well, all the neighbours came running to the man and said, you're right, this is a great thing that's happened. Now, you don't just have 1 horse, you have 2 horses. Your life will be all the better. And the old man said, well, who knows if this is a good thing or if this is a bad thing? The neighbour said, how could this possibly be a bad thing? They wrote him off. Anyway, the new horse was a wild horse. It had never been broken in. So the old man's son was riding it and trying to tame it and calm it and get it to work. But the horse was so resistant, it bucked so hard, it threw the old man's son off. He landed really badly and he broke his leg. All the neighbours came running to the man and said, you're right. Your son breaking his leg is probably worse than you losing your horse. How are you going to cope on the farm without your son to help you? And the old man said, Well, who knows if this is a bad thing or if this is a good thing? How can your son breaking his leg be a good thing? Anyway, work was hard on the farm without his son being able to help. But 1 week later, war broke out in a neighbouring town. The army came through the village, recruited all the healthy young men to fight at war, except the old man's son. He couldn't fight because he had a broken leg. All the neighbours came running to the man and said, "You are right, it is so good that your son broke his leg because he's the only one not going to die at war." You know what the old man said, don't you? Who knows if this is a good thing or a bad thing? And you know where this is going. It just keeps going and going and going. The moral of the story is, as Hamlet said, things are neither good or bad, but thinking makes them so. So when something bad, in this context, disease, strikes us, I'm not saying it feels good in the moment. That is not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying who knows where it might lead. So our next healing principle is let's regard disease as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. Now, it's up to each individual to discover what that opportunity is, but it could end up being discovering, what you're capable of, discovering your strength, giving you the nudge you needed to leave that stressful job or whatever it is that's going on in your life. When something happens and it doesn't work, let's regard it as feedback rather than failure. Because our greatest power as a human being is our ability to choose the meaning we attach to whatever we're experiencing. We get to choose what it means. It's not predetermined. And the moral of this mantra is, let's choose a meaning that will uplift us rather than crush us. And the best example of this is Jewish psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. Has anyone read his book, Man's Search for Meaning? If you haven't, I highly recommend it. Viktor Frankl, as I said, Jewish psychiatrist who in 1942 landed in a Nazi concentration camp where he spent 3 years. And during this time, he writes, I observed humankind at their absolute worst, but also at their absolute best. The type of person a prisoner became, he writes, was not the result of camp influences alone. It was the result of an inner decision. Those who survived the concentration camp weren't the ones who were the fittest and strongest when they arrived. They were the ones who were able to give their suffering a meaning that enabled them to transcend it. They were able to use their suffering as an opportunity for an inner victory. His words, not mine. Now, at no point was anyone saying, I'm having fun at the concentration camp. It's not about saying that the current situation is pleasant in any conceivable way, but how can I use the current situation to make this a better world, to bring me a better life? In the words of Charles R. Swindoll, we are all faced with a series of great opportunities, brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. Let's not mistake something that is unfamiliar with something that is impossible. And by that I mean an unfamiliar attitude to something. Or, just because we haven't seen somebody heal from something doesn't mean that it's not possible to heal from that thing. I was heartbroken when I had a client come to me and say that her diagnosis of breast cancer finally gave her an excuse to look after herself and not to put everybody else first. Gave her an excuse to pursue her long-buried passion of painting. Let's not wait for an excuse to follow our heart. Let's follow it now so we don't have to go through all the suffering. Now, is it easy to turn an obstacle into an opportunity? Is it easy to start to view our disease as an opportunity? No, I'm not saying that it's easy. But just because it's hard, and it is for us to acknowledge, yes, this disease, getting through this, making the changes you may need to make, it's hard. But hard doesn't necessarily mean bad. That's just a limiting belief. Our culture equates hard with bad, but hard is what makes a hero. Principle number 7. Hardship is the price we pay for a more meaningful life. Hardship connects us more deeply to other people. Hardship is what enables us to recognise what we're capable of. We think that happiness comes from an absence of hardship, from excellent health, from achieving our goals, from financial fulfilment. Guess what? It doesn't. Those things help, don't get me wrong, But true and lasting happiness comes from the pursuit, not just the attainment of meaningful goals, from having something really purposeful and meaningful to strive for. And hardship offers us the choice. Do I want to be a victim or a victor? As Bernice Johnson Reagan said, life's challenges are not supposed to paralyse us. They're supposed to help us discover who we really are. And I think a shining example of this is Michael J. Fox, who you remember, the actor who in his mid-30s was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And rather than being bitter, he actually considers himself blessed. He's written at least 2 autobiographies. One of them is called A Lucky Man, because he considers himself a lucky man. And what he writes is, dealing with the assault of Parkinson's and the ongoing damage to my brain is not easy. Parkinson's is not something that I would want to wish upon anybody. However, for everything that Parkinson's has taken away from me, something of even greater value has been given. Sometimes it was just what I needed to be pushed to travel a path I never would have otherwise travelled. And for that, I consider myself a lucky man. Wow, we all have that choice. So let's remember, hard doesn't necessarily mean bad. Hard is what makes a hero. Now, what if we are dealing not with something major, life-threatening that is really limiting our life in a big way? You know, coughs, colds, sinuses, aches, pains. Do I have to really do all this navel-gazing if it's something minor? Not necessarily. But for that instance, I suggest we look for leaks. And by that I mean energy leaks. You know, throughout our life, we have constant things that niggle at us, whether it's a partner that's constantly nagging, you know, a parent that is just, crossing boundaries, feeling that we've got to give too much to everybody else, just things that are frustrating or niggle us or keep coming back from our past. All those things are little energy leaks. And if we don't at some point address them, they could accumulate and drain us to the point where we become vulnerable to disease. So this is a really simple one. I just ask my clients, do you feel you have any energy leaks in your life? A really, really good health habit, at the end of every week, just do an audit of your energy leaks. Was there anything that drained you this week, and is there anything that you can do about it? Okay, the last 2 are probably my 2 favourites. Let's now examine, as the 9th principle, the word loss, as in weight loss, losing weight. The word loss feeds heavily, and the word weight does too, feeds heavily into the metaphor of war. Right now, think about this. When you hear the word loss, what's the knee-jerk response that comes up for you? Do you feel energised and excited, or do you feel sad and apprehensive when you hear the word loss? Most of the time, in most contexts, we avoid loss. We don't want to lose things. We don't want to lose a loved one. We don't want to lose a job. We don't want to lose our reputation. Even losing keys is very frustrating. So whenever we lose something, we want to find it again. And in fact, 95% of people who lose weight find it again. And they usually find extra weight because, to protect them from future losses. So I propose that we get rid of the whole notion of weight loss. Weight loss, this is another hour presentation, is a flawed and unhealthy goal because losing weight is not the same as shedding visceral fat. We don't want to lose weight because we don't want to lose muscle mass. Sarcopenia is a major problem in this society. That's a whole other conversation. But from our mid-30s, we lose about 5% of our muscle mass every decade if we don't do any health training. Sarcopenia leads to frailty, increase in dementia, increased risk of all diseases. So we don't want to lose weight because we don't want to lose our muscle. The only thing we want to do, not lose anything, we want to shed the excess fat around our abdomen. That's it. And the reason any goal associated with weight loss is doomed for failure is because the brain resists loss because it associates loss with pain, and we try and avoid pain. So it subconsciously kicks in all the behaviours that will maintain the status quo. Because fear can initiate change, but fear cannot sustain change. We are more strongly wired to seek pleasure than to avoid pain. And this was beautifully demonstrated at the 2005 Global Medical Forum, where Dr. Edward Miller, he was CEO of the medical school there, he presented the findings on 600,000, more than 500,000 cardiac patients who had all undergone coronary bypass surgery, who were in a very bad state, who were all told, if you do not change your diet, your exercise, your stress management, if you don't change a whole lot of things in your life, you'll be dead within 12 months. Can I have a show of hands? If you were given the ultimatum, change or die, who would do whatever it took to stay alive? You reckon? You're definitely the exception, because 90% of people told to change or die did not change. They all did initially, they all did for the first 3 weeks, then they started to drop off, even less by 3 months. By 6 months, 90% of them had gone back to their old ways. Why? Because they just said it was all too hard. It just wasn't worth the effort. Wasn't worth the effort to stay alive. If that's not motivation enough, what is? John Cotter, who has studied human behaviour for decades, came up with an effective solution, and it was, we have to speak to people's positive emotions. So instead of talking about losing weight and weight loss, I ask my patients, no, the goal is not weight loss. I don't want to know about numbers on a scale. What will you gain rather than lose? Strength, vitality, confidence, energy. I'll just be able to do more. I'll be able to fit into clothes. I'll be able to get a whole new wardrobe. I'll just feel better about myself. Those are the things that provide lasting motivation. And I encourage them to use words that will make you feel lighter and happier, that inspire hope, not fear. Okay, which brings us to our final really, really important health principle. Fun, not force. We have to make healthy choices fun, or people will never, ever change. Healthy choices need to be fun, not forced. Because as it stands today, adopting a healthy lifestyle is seen as a bore and a chore. I have to give up smoking, I have to give up alcohol, I have to deprive myself of all my favourite foods, I can't stay up late, I've got to get up early, I've got to go to the gym. No thanks. Whoever has been in charge of marketing health has done a really bad job. Being healthy is just seen as absolutely no fun. This has to change. If we made healthy choices seem sexier, we'd have a much healthier world. We need to learn from the fast food industry, because they have managed to convince the entire world that toxins are treats. How have they done that? A Mars a day helps you work, rest and play. No, it doesn't. A Mars a day blasts your brain cells away. Snickers really satisfies. No, it doesn't. In half an hour, your blood sugar will have dropped through the floor because it drops as fast as it rises. Liar, liar, fat cells on fire. Have a Coke and smile. Yes, all the way to the dentist. How about we come up with our own slogans? Because there are 3 types of lies. Lies, damn lies, and fast food ads. This is a really good example. Fast food, ultra-processed food marketing is a really good example of how language drives behaviour, because really and truly we are all eating poisons in pretty packaging and not giving it a second thought. It's just because some marketer, some person in advertising has said, Coke is life, Coke is it, these things will make you feel great. What a load of nonsense. And they're getting away with it. Language has so much power. We have talked ourselves into being sick by eating garbage. So let's come up with our own slogans. How about every soft drink is a bullet to our brain? Let's see how appealing soft drinks would be then if we had ad after ad telling us that soft drinks are a bullet to our brain, which they are. That's another presentation. Every chip chips away at our gut. If you go back to my blogs, I have a whole blog on why chips are carcinogenic. Junk food is junk. It is not food. How about we change things around? So, exercise is exhilarating. Movement creates magic. Honestly, if I had the money, if I won lotto, what I would do is spend it on healthy choice ads. I would just hammer the fast food industry, the ultra-processed industry, with all their own tactics for healthy choices, whether it was food or exercise. How about a dance a day keeps dementia away? Every meal is an opportunity to heal. Nutritious is delicious. That's the kind of exciting language we need to employ to motivate people to make healthy choices. It doesn't matter if you're vegan, vegetarian, omnivore or carnivore. As long as you eat food that is from the land, from the sea, from the sky or from a tree. Not from a packet, not from a tin. If it comes in a box, I'd throw it in the bin. Yes, of course, it's more nuanced than this, but if in doubt, give the product a miss. We've got to get creative with our language. We've got to get people excited about improving their health, because if we don't make it fun, things will never change. Fun always wins out over force. So to recap, here are the first 5 healing principles, and the next 5 healing principles. Actually, if you're taking a photo, I'll leave it up there a bit longer. So I will close with a quote from John Lennon, who was himself a master of language. John Lennon said, "There are 2 basic motivating forces, fear and love. If we live with fear, we pull back from life. If we live with love, we open to everything that life has to offer with acceptance, passion and excitement." Thank you very much. If you would like more, because this is like, you can tell I can talk for days and days, I can talk an hour on each principle, but everything I have talked about is the underlying principle of all my books. So if you want more, I encourage you to read my books. Some are about binge eating and shedding excess body fat without dieting or deprivation. And the other is about brain health and outwitting Alzheimer's. Or simply just subscribe to my weekly blog, which is called My Healthy Bites. You can either scan the QR code or you can go online and sign up, and we can continue the conversation that way. And for now, are there any questions? Happy to chat. Happy to take any objections. You know, if any sort of doubts came up in your mind, please share them with me. And speaking of fun, I also have some card games called Wild Cards, which each of them have they're 20 brain boosting principles. So they're all catchy slogans about how to boost your brain. Get curious, get an attitude, get grateful, get colourful, you know, eat different coloured vegetables, that kind of stuff. And if you'd like my books, I've got some for sale here too. No questions? I would love that, yes, if we could. Our word is our wand. It really is. And even the way we present things, like we have to, of course I prescribe medications, you know, some of them are life-saving, and we have to tell people that there are side effects. But it's the way we tell them. If I tell, and the research supports this, if I say to somebody, look, whatever drug X, 90% of people have no side effects, 10% of people may experience X, Y and Z. If I say that, hardly ever does anyone get side effects. If I say 10% of people will get side effects and make that the sort of core thing, the rest don't, and sort of don't mention that 90% of people don't, people are going to get side effects. Much more likely to get side effects if you focus on the side effects. I always go, I tell them the honest percentage, which is always obviously going to be more people don't get side effects than do. So if you start with that, people will tolerate the medication a lot better as well, if medication is necessary. But as I said, you do these 10 things first and hopefully medication won't be necessary. But they have recorded this, so you can go back and listen to the first half. Anything else? Who's was sort of already aware of this? Great.
That's fantastic.
Pleasure.
Yeah, just very affirming. I missed your introduction, sorry. I'm nearly on.
Oh, so I forgot. There was no MC. I didn't even introduce myself. I'm really sorry. I'm Dr. Helena Popovic. I'm trained as a GP, but I actually do more. I do 1 day a week, but I have to confess, I believe that the way we've structured medicine is unhelpful. You know, in 20 minutes, I'm supposed to get a history, establish rapport, go through all the possible contributing factors and prescribe a management plan. That's ridiculous. So I choose to do way more health coaching and spend a lot of time and apply all these principles. So yeah, I'm trained as a standard GP Sydney University, but I do more I do more conference speaking than anything else, conference speaking and health coaching. Sorry, I should have told you who I was. You had no idea whether I had any credibility at all.
Feedback. I feel really moved by the language with the John Lennon quote that you
Mm-hmm.
as well. I've actually got a very, very close friend who's a midwife was like fundamental to Australia's home birth scene. Who's actually got dementia now, and that was her like mantra was love and not fear. So
Yeah.
all families don't have this choice. Like you've got two choices.
Yes.
In your emotions.
Yes.
It's very moving to hear.
And I'm
Saying that as well, and I told her that I was coming today, and I told her that I was coming to this particular one.
Thank you.
Medicine, because we've always been into holistic care.
And it's not about forcing ourselves to be positive all the time, not at all. It's about allowing ourselves to feel our feelings. Because if the best way to treat, say, binge eating is to actually sit with the feeling of the craving, to just sit there with it. And if we just sit there and don't fight it and don't resist it, and it's very unpleasant, because I've been there, very unpleasant, it's just feeling a negative emotion that could overwhelm you, whether it's grief or sadness or anger or just frustration. It's really unpleasant, but it doesn't last. And then it's like, whew, it's like having an internal shower. But we have to be brave enough to just, and give ourselves the time and the privacy to sit with our emotions. But that is one of the most powerful things we can do, because if we can just sit with our emotions, if we can not run away from our emotions, if we can just be with our emotions, we can be with anything, because that's the hardest thing there is to deal with, our own emotions. And suppressed hostility, holding things in, especially the studies that have been done with melanoma patients, those who actually try and keep a brave front and never admit to any fear, but secretly they are fearful, they do the worst. The ones that try and force themselves to keep upbeat for everybody else. Feeling our feelings gives us power. And feeling our feelings, again, people go, yeah, but then I'm just going to smack somebody across the head. No, that's not feeling your feeling. That's acting out your feeling. Feeling your feeling is just sitting there and feeling it, not doing anything. So that's a really important distinction. I think that's a hint that I have to close. So if you've got any more questions, I'll be sitting at the desk for a little while. Thank you again.